I don't know what you guys talking about. Okay.
Oh, we were talking about how he was thinking about moving to Spain and he canceled the flight, but it would have been in January, right before they got hit really bad with COVID.
I see now.
So he was like, yeah, I got pretty lucky. And I'm like, yeah, you did.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get into it. So, Ahmed, what is the conclusion in which you've come to?
Hello. All right. So when I was looking at them, at the basic level, I was finding that there was like, so what I found at least was the designs that weren't holding my interest. I couldn't figure out entirely, but I felt that there was like a disconnect somewhere where like the design itself was like, it was like good on the surface, but it would fall apart as I would sort of, I guess, quote unquote, travel into it deeper. So what I did was I kind of quickly Googled to see what the principles of design were. And I'm actually comparing a couple of examples right now of different sculptures. And what I noticed was that the one that that I really enjoy looking at, hits all of the principles. Whereas the other ones, they hit some, but not all of them. And that's what I didn't really know how to kind of articulate it initially until I kind of read what the design principles were. So I'm just at the moment looking at pictures of those beside each other, and trying to rework the ones that aren't that good and see if I can maybe alter what's causing them to be not as good, I guess, if I'm articulating that properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. No, the main thing was that I just noticed, what I felt was that it's almost like the idea of like, silhouettes and graphic breakups and then like, blocking in a character. It's like the designs that were initially at first glance were good, but not that great afterwards. It's almost like their immediate silhouette seemed to be appealing. But then when you kind of traveled in from the outer edge inward, then you start to see that things didn't work well together. So then it would sort of fall apart. Whereas the ones which are completely like cohesive, it was both the silhouette and the internal smaller pieces looked like they all went well together. It does go back to what you were telling me initially when you were reviewing my work about the idea of like patterns and rhythms. Yeah, so when I did Google up the elements of design, I noticed that the one that I really like hits every single piece really well. I'm gonna have to like think on it a little bit more.
So that's definitely a huge part of it. So I'm actually pretty impressed that you already are using the strategies that I've been suggesting immediately, which is just kind of like let me look into this. And one thing that you did that I think people forget to do is like Google. Like why not?
Right.
And this is kind of my point, is that it's poorly documented. So it's not necessarily easy to find, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's easily explained, but it's there. It's somewhere around there, and it's just there's no piecemeal just yet. The same thing's actually happened with me with trying to discover graphic engineering, like graphics engineering I was talking about before. Like that's actually incredibly poorly documented, at least like the start of it. Like there's nothing that I found that's just immediately a beginner's level that makes sense. It's like it's already like you have to have a lot of prerequisite. But that's part of the deal, like trying to find that prerequisite. You know what I mean? Right. And I can tell you from experience that like concept art was very much like that too, where finding information on how to be a good concept artist was actually pretty hard. There's only really a couple places where you can go. Like Gnomon DVDs were like the only place you can really get like what you got anything. All right. that was related to concept art, and they're like $60-$70 a video.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and so I stole the crap out of those, man. I couldn't afford them. I was like a poor kid. but you know, that's what inspired me to make my tutorials more affordable, you know, and thankfully the rest of the industry started to kind of go in that same direction, which is awesome. But like that was not like there was not enough resources, you know. That's what I'm getting at ultimately. And the second part of it though, about like so you Googled it, you found like the principles of design, and by the way, those principles have been mostly found in like graphic design and industrial design, like the places in which I told you to go look. That's where some of that stuff's coming from, and in fact, different disciplines, they'll have different philosophies off of those principles. So you got to be very careful on which principles you agree with, and which ones that are just kind of specially made, you know? Right. But you're on the right track. That's exactly right. I'm actually very proud of your ability to find that. Now, here's another thing. This is one thing that's really important to pay attention to. Is your personal taste and what you're looking for. Meaning that you got to be careful on what you think is good based off of your immediate search. Meaning that maybe you're looking for shapes now because you're all about shapes. So everything that has good shapes, like that's now like all you care about. That's all you see now. Okay?
Right.
And that's the reason why you have to be careful of that, is that you might accidentally like something or think something is good because it's answering a question very clearly for you, right?
Right.
Versus actually being good. You know, it's like maybe there was like a crossroads you're having at a very specific stage, like in terms of design, right? But then you, you know, like I said, you then begin to only look for that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And when you start to look for only that kind of stuff, then you may actually be disregarding the stuff that's going to push you to the next level. So I always have a folder or a series of images that I always call quality control. And that's exactly what they do. They always keep me within quality, you know? Quality control. And the way that I gauge what I think is generally good, like outside of my own taste, I outsource this, meaning that I look at what is popular. Okay. Now, there is a subjective opinion about popularity that I can agree with parts of, but I also disagree with strongly. Okay. So for instance, I disagree strongly with the idea that just because something is popular, that it automatically is bad. You know, this is kind of like a natural reaction that people have, like, oh, you know, it's generic or it's poppy, you know, and then they immediately write it off. Like they write off generic, they write off poppiness, and every art director is like, I don't want it to be generic. But then, as they give you more and more review, they tend to go more generic. I remember this happened when I was working on this project. They were like, "Hey, we want to do like treants." I was like, "Cool, man." And they're like, "But we don't want to, you know, the traditional generic, like just giant tree monster. We want to go cooler, you know, interesting, you know, something that's like no one has ever seen before." And I was like, "Okay, I can do that easily, you know." They're like, "We don't want it to be like Lord of the Rings, you know, like it's already been done before, you know." And I'm like, "All right, let's do it." So I started going and I started drawing this really out of the, like off the wall designs of like treants. And they're just like, "Oh man, it's a little too crazy. Like, can you like make it a little more humanoid?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course, let's do it." So I made it more humanoid, and they're like, "Yeah, no, it's still too like, it's too hard to like, you can't really kind of recognize any of these features. Like, there's nothing here that's really sticking, you know?" And I say, "Yeah, okay, I can go a little bit more, you know." And then eventually, it just looked like a Lord of the Rings treant. And they were like, oh, perfect. You know, and I was just like, yo. And, but I wasn't like mad. I was just like, it's funny. It's funny to me that like everybody in principle, you know, always says they want that, right? They always want something new no one has ever seen before. But that doesn't necessarily, and this goes in the other direction, just because people have seen it before doesn't mean that it can't be good, you know? And it goes in the other direction as well. Like just because people haven't seen it before doesn't automatically make it good. You know, like if I were to draw, you know, like a little fish, right? That's cool. You know what I haven't ever seen? I haven't seen a fish with a robot gun arm that shot bananas. Now, that in my opinion is pretty unique. Okay, I'm almost certain that I might be the first person that has ever even thought of this. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't necessarily mean it's good right off the bat. Now, don't get me wrong. It doesn't mean I can't make this good. Oh, I can definitely make it good. You know? I would lean in on what I think would make it good. Nostalgia, I'd lean in on that kind of stuff, like where people would probably enjoy it. I would lean in on the hilarity of it, you know?
Yeah.
Like be in on the joke. So
okay.
this is important because if you take a look at shows like Rick and Morty, there's a lot of design principles visually that are just not good. But yeah, it's a great show. So why? Right? So this is why I'm saying, like, you got to be very careful. But I would never say that Rick and Morty designs are good, right? Like visually.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Wait,
right.
One of my kids are talking. Can you close the door, please? Thank you. And so, like, you see what I'm saying? Like, people will mistake what they like, what they're searching for, as good. Because Rick and Morty isn't popular. It's part of pop culture, but it's not like popular, like Minecraft popular. Not like Disney movie popular, you know?
Right.
And so then you say, okay, well, what makes Disney movies and all that kind of stuff good? And if you have a hard time, like, because some people just are weird like that, they just, for whatever reason, just hate popular stuff. They just don't like it at all. As soon as it's popular. Yeah. And I don't necessarily mean that, like, because it's popular, or I'm sorry, like, there's something about popular stuff that people don't like. No, I'm saying because it's, like, just generally popular. Like, if Rick and Morty started getting really popular mainstream, that same individual would be like, whatever. Rick and Morty's garbage. You know, like, what? You know, they flip-flop their opinion because they are natural contrarians. They just look at the popular opinion and then they go against it. This is kind of why you see a lot of conspiracy theorists. They're very much in this vein. You know? Mm-hmm. But now I'm going to go the other direction. There is rationale, though, to having some criticism of popular media and popular ideas. Absolutely. You know, I'm not saying you should just go all in now and all popular things are good. It's just that just the immediate absolute write-off, as we talked about last class, I'm like always a little bit like, wait a minute, you know, like you can't come into the conversation with me and be like, all popular stuff is just garbage, right? Like I remember my friend and I, we used to get in these debates about Transformers. He said, Transformers is trash. And I was like, if it's trash, then why do so many people around the world love it? You know? He's like, because they're all idiots. And I was like, all right. Like, okay, you know, superior, like, being, you know, the person who knows all, right? Like, look, I get that you don't like it, but that doesn't mean that the thing is trash. And I always like to, and I would argue with him about this because I generally don't think Transformers is bad. I think Transformers does a good job of being Transformers. It's what it's advertised to do, you know? And it does it really well, whether you like it or not. And I look at something like Twilight in the same vein. You know, I didn't like Twilight at all, right? But I understand why it did well. It's important as a designer to understand why it did well, you know?
Right.
And not in a shallow way, like in a meaningful way. Like if I was to design for Twilight, I think I could do a good job, you know? And it wouldn't be as like, oh, I'm just going to draw a naked boy. Like, no. It's not just about naked boys. It's very specific. You know, you got to draw a guy who looks strong, but has kind eyes, right? Like, is somebody that, you know, in real life, it doesn't exist, right? This idea that people are attracted to people that are good for them. This just doesn't happen because movies and media and advertising tell the story of like, it's got to be dope. Like the relationship at every stage is amazing. And if it's not, you haven't found the one, right? Which is a complete lie. It's not how it works. Building relationships takes time, you know? You should be with somebody that generally gets most of what you like. They should be above 70%. You guys get along, right? And then work towards getting that 100% together. There's never going to be that like immediate 100%. But movies and all this stuff kind of tell this lie. So you have this movie where Belle walks in for the first time, and Edward just jizzes his pants like immediately when he sees her, right? Yeah, it's like the dream, like this immediate, just like falling over. And most dudes that actually do this in real life to, you know, to this young female audience, like they go to high school, they see this guy that really does this, they friend zone them, right? Like hard. And it goes both ways, by the way. It's not like in one direction. But it's like, but then the guys who look like Edward, right? The guys who look like Jacob, do not give two shits about that person because they look like Edward and they look like Jacob. They can do whatever the fuck they want, right? And so then you have this weird kind of conundrum when you're like living in the real world, you know? But there's something to that. Like, so I would know that I would need to draw like an e-boy, you know? And like if they were to do remake Twilight today, that's pretty much what I would do. You know, I would start looking at like very popular e-boy guys, the people that look like the K-pop stars, right? The one with makeup and earrings, and they look like beautiful men, you know? Because that's young teen, that's the younger audience. That's what they would like, and that's what I would have to design. Not what I think is good, because what I like in my vampires is in the movie 30 Days of Vampires, right? Where they're fucking sharks and they're like eviscerating people's necks, you know?
Right.
That's what I like. But that movie did incredibly poorly, you know? Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that I don't like it. Like, I loved it. Here's a good example of a popular movie that I hated, the Lord of the Rings franchise. I don't like them. Same thing with Harry Potter. Yeah, I don't like Harry Potter. Now, ironically, I might actually work on Lord of the Rings, right? but the movies, I only like the Two Towers, and it's the Battle of Helm's Deep because that speaks to me. I love action, and I love just like adventure, and that's like the best part of action and adventure right there. Everything else is just like fucking walking and talking about like their problems. It's just like so. It's like I know why this is good though. Like why people like it. It's because of the journey, and it's because of like the fantasy of that world, right? It's the same with Harry Potter. It's like that world is so cool, so fantastic. You know, you hear the music. You know, you just feel like, nice. I want to live in the Shire, dude. I want to live in the Shire. You know, I want to be a hobbit and just hang out all day, you know? And like, oh man, look at these hobbits go and all this stuff. It's just like, it's really like epic, you know? You shall not, you know, like it's super epic at times. And I'm not in it, you know? But I understand that. So if I were to work on it, that would be my focus. Okay, if they're working on because Amazon, right? They reached out to me. So if they are working on this MMO, I'm like, if you guys go full in on just the action aspect of it, I don't think you're going to hit the audience right. It's like it's like Star Trek, the new Star Trek movies. Like a lot of the original Star Trek fans aren't really a big fan of it because it's too action packed. I loved it though, and most audiences did too. They're like, "What? Star Trek's tight." And then a lot of people went and watched the old Star Treks and were like rudely awakened that they were more like Twilight Zone, like mystery, sci-fi mysteries versus just action packed, you know, full throttle J.J. Abrams lensflare movies, which I love, by the way. I love those types. But you see my point? Like, this is what makes you become a good designer, is to be able to separate your own opinion versus what's really going on. And that would be, because I do want to kind of answer some other questions. I'm sure some people have questions. But I will say, though, that popular opinion, though, doesn't necessarily always mean good, because there is parts of popular opinion that really speak to the most shallowest parts of humanity, and those are kind of problematic. And that speaks back to like when I was talking about like social media and stuff. So like reality TV shows and the over glorifying terrible role models. This has to stop. Sounds like an old man talking, but it's just the truth. If you look at the numbers don't lie. People are more anxious than they've ever been before. They've been more depressed than they've ever been before.
Yep.
Especially young women. This is incredibly sad. And I have a young daughter, and she's like, I want to make a YouTube channel. I was like, bitch, never. You're never gonna make one until you're like 18 of age. Right. And even then I'm just like, I don't even think that is a good idea, because unless by the next 10 years, there's some real, like some social or cultural change. It is a world of lies. Like I watch TikTok, right? I love TikTok. It's hilarious. But then I see every once in a while, I see these videos of these young girls doing these crazy dances. Right. And there's this thing that they'll do where somebody will comment on their video. They'll post a comment, and then they'll react to it, like showing like this extension of confidence about like I don't know. They say, "Oh, you got a big butt," and then they'll do something that's like, "I don't give a fuck," right? Like on the surface. But I know, because I once was an insecure teenager, I know that kind of reaction is not sustainable.
Right. Meaning
that if you keep on trying to appease the trolliest of trolls, you're never going to win. You're going to lose that battle.
Right.
Where you are constantly being bombarded by these types of comments, it's not the same person. It's always going to be someone else. It's not going to be exhausted to the internet in its entirety, right? And I think this is what's happening to young kids, and why they're going to get real effed in the M. Like their minds are going to be warped, And that is popular media, like stuff like that, So I'm not necessarily like when I look at Marvel movies, I don't think Marvel movies is a problem. I don't think that when someone watches like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they're not going to go home and have insecurities about not being able to throw buildings or something like this, But like. Like I'm sure they'll have the fantasy and be jealous that they don't live in a world of fantasy like this, but it's like so overtly fantasy that it's kind of like it's okay. Like most people know it's just not a thing, right?
Right.
But there's something about just like this one person got really popular and I didn't. Like I did the same dance, I did the same thingy, I did all the stuff. Am I not as attractive, or am I not as cool? That's like crazy that's like available to young people. If I was exposed at such a young age, all the stupid shit and insecurities that I had at that young age, man, that would have been rough, man.
Yeah.
And there was times when my friends made fun of me for certain things, and I didn't take it well, But I was amongst friends, and it was like one incident, and we got past it. We duked it out, and then that was it. Imagine just like every day, my insecurity out there, everybody's just going all in on it. That's rough. So don't get me wrong. I don't think that all popular media is, like I said, I don't believe in absolutes. There's always going to be a little bit of gray, right? And you just got to be good at finding the gray, so that way you'll have a better average on what is good, what's bad, versus your own personal opinion. You know?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean,
Always be driven by your personal opinion. I think your personal opinion should drive what you ultimately want to do, right? But it shouldn't be
right.
like this kind of totalitarian type of attitude of like, but my opinion is the best opinion. That's just not true. There's so many opinions, and everybody has such great, personalities in this world. So clearly, it's okay to have a little bit of diversity of opinion.
Right. Yeah, no, I know we have to move on, but I just want to quickly say, I understand what you're saying, because I've kind of I came from kind of like this extreme of, I was one of those people where I just was never a fan of like stuff that was popular. But what I noticed was what I noticed was, but I also had a personality growing up, which was kind of like a little bit I wouldn't say clinically bipolar, but sometimes tended to be a little bit like swinging to one side, swinging to the other side. And what I have been doing in the past few years is instead of trying to like rush and kind of balance myself out, I've been taking conscious steps towards getting to center. And the reason that I was asking you the question about, why one design works and another doesn't, or et cetera, is more lately I've been just finding a little bit more awareness of my own self. So I just noticed when I was looking at the link you shared, I noticed I was like, well, why do I like this one and not that one? But I also you gave the warning of being careful of my own bias. It was sort of like in the back of my mind as well. I was like, well, I've seen this before in the past. I liked it before. I don't like it now. Am I entirely sure I'm looking at it the way I should, or, so yeah. It's a bit of a weird little carnival in my head at this point.
Well, that's part of what I'm getting at. Just keep on having a dialogue, right? Don't immediately think you have an answer. That's how scientists work, and they're able to do crazy cool stuff. So,
right.
But anyway, yeah, hope that helps. Give you some larger insight.
Cool. Thanks.
Any other questions? Take a couple more since I already talked too much. I do feel bad, but it was good. I'm sure you guys learned the thing.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I feel like we talk about so many things that it's like, since everyone's got a question, I'm learning things that I didn't think about, but it's like a question that I would have had later.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I love about having a class of multiple people. That's the whole idea, right? Like you get an opportunity to hear questions and answers that you may have not thought about or even were brave enough to ask, and somebody did for you. It's always great.
One thing I wanted to actually ask was, do you have any really good advice on best resources to look at for building forms? Like if you're thinking about how perspective works, and you're thinking about, okay, so this is how the form is going to look in space, in 3D. Do you have any recommendations for what would be good to look at, or what would be good exercises to do to practice that?
Yeah, so there's plenty of great resources, like look at still life studies and specifically cast studies. But the reality is that it's actually just a fundamental thing that you should be practicing, right? Which is just painting forms in its simplest form. That's it. Just get really good.
Boxes and circles.
Yes, the boring
pyramids
stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Like if you can't paint, like here's a good challenge. Like try to paint like a box, cone, sphere, right? From your own memory, right? Like in all the same kind of gray material with a light source coming from one direction, and paint them to the point where if you showed it to me or showed it to anybody else, they would think that it was a photorealistic image.
Okay.
If you have a hard time doing that, right? Just cubes and spheres and cones, right? If you have a hard time painting that to make it look believable, like I'm looking at a 3D render, right? What chance do you have to actually do that for like a full figure, right?
Not much.
Do you see kind of the point there, right? It's like if Yeah, here's something this is getting a little spicy political opinion. It was where I was talking to my friend about Kanye West running for president, and I said, you know what makes me sad about this is that he clearly is like he has a mental disorder. Like he needs assistance, right? Like if this is somebody's cousin or uncle, in a normal circumstance, like they weren't multi-billionaires, right? Like celebrities, they would help him. You know, they would be safe from scrutiny from the outside world because there would be support there in a real way. I'm not trying to say that the support isn't there for him now or they don't care. I'm just saying at the scale in which they have to help him, this is really the best thing they can do is just keep him away from the public eye at all costs, right? Which is just incredibly challenging because he's a public figure. And I said, you know what, crazy, it's like nobody thinks of it this way. And this is the same way I feel about our current president. It's like nobody thinks of it like, if we saw some other kind of person of some sort of other disability, right? Like, let's say somebody that was born with no legs and no arms, right? These people exist, and there's nothing wrong with it. They're just severely disadvantaged, at least at the beginning, right?
Right.
If that individual came to me, and this is like a beloved loved one, and out of nowhere was like, I'm going to be an Olympic swimmer, and without warning, just jumps right into the pool. Okay, they've never trained, they've never even attempted it in a more controlled environment, right? Because I'm not saying that it's impossible. I'm just saying now you're going to do it like right now, and they jump in head first and they start drowning, right?
Right.
You wouldn't have people being like, oh, look how brave that person is. Or like, you know what? I like his attitude. I'm all about what he's about. No, people will jump in to save him because at that moment, that person made a choice that was just not incredibly safe. Now, I'm using that as an extreme example, but we don't have to go to the extremes. We can go to just a general example. Any job that you have never trained in, just to jump right in is an incredible gamble to even stick the landing on, right?
Right.
Right. So if I've never been a heart surgeon, so if I just walked into a hospital, I'd be like, you know what, guys, let's try it. I watched a lot of YouTube videos. I think I get it.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
But it's just kind of like, it doesn't necessarily mean that you know what you're doing.
Yes.
So you have to
the
practice
idea.
it.
Yeah. So the idea now going all the way back to forms, the idea of like, if you can't do the most basic thing well, it's like that's a good indicator that you will have a hard time doing anything complicated. That's all. Now, it doesn't mean to say that you cannot learn from complicated things, right? Like I'm sure I can learn heart surgery by just going in and start working on people's hearts. But a lot of people are going to die first. A lot of people, there's going to be a lot of grief versus going through the normal means of learning human anatomy inside and out, working on cadavers and working in simulation, right? Working under pressure, but in a safe and controlled environment, right?
Right.
Same thing with the example of the person with no legs and arms, just jumps heads first. There's going to be a lot of swallowing of water, So
it means there's going to be a lot of mistakes when you start.
Yeah, a lot of unnecessary mistakes. It's not to say that you cannot learn. Eventually you will, right? And with the example of the heart surgery, the only caveat is people die, right? But like with the swimming part, that's not a great example because you may very well be that would be your last attempt. Your first and last, right? So there are some things that if you just jump in head first, it will be the last thing. But art is not one of those. It doesn't kill you by doing bad anatomy, bad forms, right? The stakes are not that high. And so, but you understand the premise of what I'm getting at, right? And so, yeah. And you can switch it up. You don't have to always start with simple stuff. You can kind of like start with simple stuff and then go like something semi-complicated, You can design your own shapes. They can be like oblong shapes. That's what I used to do. I used to design like shapes like this. and just make that look three-dimensional, you know? But that's an exercise. That's how you would go about learning how to do this, you know? And then you're going to make mistakes. You're not going to do it well. But then you're going to find the appropriate resources, right? You're going to look online now with a little bit more of an agenda. You know? You're going to have a little bit more drive to go in the right direction.
Right. I guess
but,
I just feel like I struggle the most with like cylinders.
Yeah, awesome. That's perfect. Like that is a actionable thing to practice. You see what I'm saying? Like you shouldn't look at it like, oh man, I have a hard time drawing cylinders. You should look at it as like, oh, I need to work on my cylinders because I have a hard time. That is like I think this is a problem that most people have. This is not an artistic problem, by the way. That whenever they are faced with something that is a challenge, like they take it personal. Don't take it personal. You know what I mean? Like why?
To you.
Yeah, but even still, like, why would you be good at cylinders? Like, what makes you have the right to all of a sudden be a cylinder painting master? Do you see my point? Like, do you see how kind of bizarre it is to kind of look at something that you're not good at as a character flaw versus a lack of training, right?
Right.
And that kind of perspective is, and this is what I was telling Ahmed too. You know, some of the other guys, like this idea of just like, oh man, it's rough, you know, like that immediate reaction is fine. It's just a follow-up. What is your follow-up? You know? And so
like if you start on something and you can't quite get it right, then what's the actionable plan to make it right?
Yeah, like Jin had that same problem, right? Like he's like, I don't think characters are for me. And I'm like, why? Like, why do you think that? Because it was hard? You know? And do you see my point? Like, it's like, oh yeah, what was I thinking? Like, of course it's hard. Why would it be easy? You know? So there's this thing that I would tell people. It's like, you would start off recognizing that you suck. Right? You're like, oh man, there's something I suck at. And the most immediate reaction is mostly appropriate reaction is that you would practice it. Right?
Mm-hmm. And
then the next thing that happens, that occurs, is that you realize that it is hard. Right? Mm-hmm. And what tends to happen, this is when people take it personal, they then quit, which ultimately keeps them sucking.
It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah. So the point that doesn't change are these. Like, this doesn't change. Like, of course you suck. You need to practice. That is an unchangeable variable. You have to practice to get out of suckiness. And this is also an unchangeable variable, which is that it is going to be a challenge, right? Because you're approaching something you're not good at. And it's going to be hard. But this is an opportunity. This is a choice. You don't have to quit. You get it?
Mm-hmm. You can just keep swimming.
You can just keep swimming. You can just practice some more. Maybe study. Maybe look at what you practiced, see what you did wrong, right? You maybe made mistakes on how you were learning. That's totally fine. That's totally part of the deal. That's what makes it hard. If it was easy to understand right away, then nobody would be bad at anything. Everybody would be good at everything that they were good at. But reality is you still suck. Okay? And you still got to practice. And you still are going to be challenged. But you're not going to quit. You're going to keep up the momentum. Right? And all of a sudden, if we were to use this as an example of like the further away you are from the center, the better you get. You know? Mm-hmm. Eventually you'll spiral to not suck. You know?
Uh-huh.
But like you said, it's a vicious cycle. It's very like when you really think of it like that, like in that diagram that I just drew, it's like so stupid to think that you should give up after something is hard, right?
Right.
Like if the objective is, I want to be a great artist, let's say character concept artist, and you're learning anatomy and you're really struggling, that is not an example of you being a flawed artist. Never think this way. It is an example that you need to do more of it. It's the opposite reaction. And I'm going to let you guys in on a secret. This is what separates the greats. Okay? This is what makes the greats the greats. Is that the people who are good at what they do, I heard this on TikTok, actually. It's really great. I'm going to repeat this. I said something different. I said something different before, but I'm going to say with this because it's so poetic. You know, the reason why, like, Einstein was as smart and as accomplished as he was not because he was smarter and more talented than everybody else. He just stuck with problems longer. And man, is that the truth. You see kind of where I'm landing with this, right? Mm-hmm. And all the great artists that I've met in my whole career, all the amazing people that I've seen grow into themselves, like people that I've taught or the people that I met along the way, this is the Great Equalizer. Meaning that this is where everybody meets, right there, where they all put in the time and effort longer than most other individuals. Does it make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So my advice usually is, as soon as something starts to sting, you should get excited because you're starting to find a flaw that you can correct. Okay?
Yeah.
And then try to do it. And realize that every moment that you are every moment that you are doing that thingy, right? Mm-hmm. There's somebody else that got to that same point and stopped. Because they did exactly what I told you. Like, they took it too personal. They got too insecure about their own abilities. Whatever the reason is, they could have some good reasons too, you know? Mm-hmm. That's the difference. That's it. That's the only difference.
So that they stopped.
You kept going. You didn't. Or I'm sorry, you kept going. They didn't go. That's it. And I found this thing on my Instagram. This is something that I did in 2007. And I repainted it in 2017.
That's awesome. That's a 10-year difference.
So clearly, you guys are all better than I was in 2007. Make no mistake. So this idea that, like, oh, AJ, maybe you're different. No, dude. I was probably worse than most of you guys. So really take it from me. It's really just a matter of perspective. See, I think the advantage that I have over most people is that I was incredibly arrogant. I still am from time to time. I have a combination of features that I think sets me up to learn and grow way more effectively than most other individuals. This is why it makes it easier for me to learn, is that I do not self-deprecate, right? I don't look at my artwork and think I'm the shitty artist. Like when I did that painting that you saw, that really trashy one, I thought it was the best thing I ever did. I was like, man, this is great. But then I would see other people's work who are clearly better. And I am a man that if I see results that are clearly better, or if I see an example of better strategies, excellence, I actually lean in on that very easily. It's really hard to keep me in my ways. Like I can change and pivot pretty effectively and pretty often. You know?
Yeah.
Going on to political stuff, like for instance, I had a very rigid opinion about gun control. Like I was specifically on the side of we should just completely ban guns, right? Because logically it made sense to me. But then I was talking to somebody, and they really talked to me into understanding that this is just not a thing. We just can't do this. And I was like, oh, that's incredibly rational. And I was convinced. I was like, all right, like this is something that, like, if you look in the political world, these are the kinds of things that just people will never budge on. right? Like if you are this thing, you're always going to be this thing. And this is actually what I think is a problem, you know, and people are only digging their heels deeper, and it's kind of scaring me, right? This idea that, no, if you show me more convincing evidence, yeah, I'm more than likely to change my opinion on something, you know? Like if they just came out today, well, like, here's a good example. Like I am pretty much on board with the idea that the pandemic is real. I am on board with that. This is a big deal. We should pay attention to it, right? I am always a big fan of be safe than sorry. But when it comes fall, and we find out that it was nearly not as bad as we thought, right? And the numbers are fine, and we're doing okay. You know, there's like nations like Sweden, which they just full speed ahead into it. They didn't do any real precaution, right?
Right.
And their numbers don't look nearly as bad as they should, you know? So I'm looking at this information, and I'm not turning a blind eye to it just because for whatever stupid political belief you might be on, right? But I also understand how science works. Science takes time, dude. You know? They were using ventilators in the beginning, and they found out that's actually more devastating to do than it is to save people. Like you want to wait at all costs people on ventilators. And by the way, that's a good advice. So if you have somebody that you know love, you might want to kind of give that insight, as well as if that happens to you. You just want to stay off of it, because what ends up happening is if your body starts to realize you're not breathing for yourself, it just turns you off.
Oh, geez, that's scary.
Yeah, that's what they discovered, but that's how science works. It's unfortunate they had to discover it this way. This is why we should have took more precautions in the beginning. But whatever, what's done is done. But this is what I'm getting at. Like, I'm pretty confident that the pandemic's real. Obviously, I think that it's real. And then I also believe that all the stuff that's being told to us, most, if not all of it, is generally has the right intentions, you know? I don't really believe in conspiracies. I've been to the DMV. I don't really believe that the government is this good at this kind of like withholding of information at that scale. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just don't think so. And so, but my point is that,
like the 5G towers.
Yeah, the 5G towers. I'm not convinced, but that doesn't mean I can't be. You get what I'm saying? So I have this ability to be incredibly confident in what I believe in. Like I have these strong belief systems that allow me to function and to move forward, right?
Right.
But if somebody comes in and says, like, change my whole worldview with some fucking knowledge bombs, absolutely, man. Like you wanna be that kind of individual anyway, someone who's able to change their opinion. And one of the things that I did, I talked to somebody who was super Trump supporter, and I got him off of supporting Trump. Is like, do you generally believe that a person who says they do nothing wrong actually does nothing wrong? Like, isn't that like a red flag, dude? Like, if you knew somebody, like just some regular person, right, that said like, I'm always right. There's nothing that I do wrong. We always find out that is almost the opposite of the truth, you know? And for whatever reason, you're telling me some rich kid grew up rich, was given a golden spoon his whole life, never was punished for any of his failures, right? You're telling me that this guy's got the right attitude? What are you doing, man? What's going on here? Why are you so full tilt on this? This is crazy. And let's be clear. There are things that he has done that I 100% support. I'm a big fan of. But if you're not on that, if you are not on the fully the Trump team, you know, then you're clearly a libtard, right? And if you are completely opposed, or if you are completely on Trump's side, then you clearly are a racist, right? And it's like, it is like, I love it when people will throw at me and stuff like, oh, but you know, Obama did this. And I was like, so you agree that this is bad? Right? So that we agree that this is bad then. Like putting people in cages, we both agree. Like you say that, oh, but Obama put people in cages. I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. But we agree though, right? That it's bad. Well, let's start with there. Like, it's cool. Well, let's acknowledge that this is bad. Because Obama did it too, and Obama bad. You know? And it's funny to see people like all of a sudden realize, like, wait a minute, why am I saying, hey, Mama murdered people? Okay, but we agree murdering is bad, right? You think that I love Obama, dude? I don't know Obama, dude. I don't know anything about him. You know, he's not my friend. I don't know anything that he's done for me, dude. Like, it's like, what are you talking about, dude? Just because somebody else does something bad. I thought we learned this in grade school. You know, 2 wrongs don't make a right. Like, what the hell is going on here? Why have people lost their common sense, you know?
I think it's a situation is either you're with us or against us. There's like no middle ground.
Yeah, and it's really bad. It's really, this is what scares me.
Well, what
right?
is the saying? Like only a Sith does an absolute or something like that.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Well, I think most people are trying to find the 3 lefts make a right situation nowadays.
Yeah, right. Like when this whole George Floyd stuff happened, right? Which is another great example of like this is clearly bad. I mean, I don't know anyone. I am happy to find that most people, at least at the beginning, was like, no, this looks pretty bad. But then when people start talking about like, okay, how can we fix this? Then that's when people started pulling out all the stops on all the wrong attitude. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it goes back to my point of like, you know, having absolutes is really I question it immediately. I am certain about so many things, and I'm also certain that I've been wrong about so many things. You know, there has not been a thing like I remember reading this thing where somebody was saying like this like psychiatrist was talking about how most people are wrong about most of their ideas. Like most of the things that most people know to be true are wrong. Right?
Right.
And like, so he says like, and generally speaking, it's not to say that you guys are like, oh no, like, does that mean everything I believe? Like, no, he's like, most things that people believe is not entirely true. Like, it doesn't mean it's entirely wrong. It's just that like here's a great example. My friend used to believe that Samuel L. Jackson was in Lethal Weapon. And I was like, no, that was Danny Glover. And he's like, no. Danny Glover is not in Lethal Weapon. He's not in it. Samuel L. Jackson in it. And I was like, no, dude. Like, I would know. I love action movies. Danny Glover, dude. I think you're getting confused with the white cop, black cop dynamic, or black sidekick dynamic from Die Hard. That was in Die Hard. It was Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson. And he was just like, no, dude. Like, trust me, man. Like, I saw it the other day, and I was like, I know categorically you're wrong, my man. Like, I am a fan of these movies franchises. Like, I'm too old for this shit. That's Danny Glover, dude. That's not Samuel L. Jackson. Samuel L. Jackson's a motherfucker, right? He says motherfucker. Like, I'm too old for this shit. That's Danny Glover, dude. And that's from Lethal Weapon. And we would argue, and then, you know, we would just leave it at that. Like, that was how an argument would end. But now it's like, no, I can just pull up my phone and just show you. And it would be great to think that I was immune to this, but I was wrong too. I remember I was telling somebody, I was like, oh, you know that Terry Crews is 5'9", and he's like, what? He's like, yeah, dude. I was so confident. And then he's like, I don't think you're right, dude. I was like, dude, I know all black actors with the same confidence that I had with a Lethal Weapon. And he pulled up on his phone. He's like, no, he's like 6'2". And I was like, wait, what? Like, no. Let's get some pictures of him standing with like tall people, like Conan O'Brien or something. And no, sure enough, he is like super tall. I was like, oh, what the? And I was like, where did I get this information? Like, why was I so confident that was true? But okay, I'm gonna circle all the way back around. So this confidence, this arrogance, right, is really helpful to kind of push you forward, right? Because I'm not always self-deprecating. I'm not always low in confidence, right? I have high confidence in my abilities, even when it was unjustified. Okay. But now it's getting more and more justified. It's incredibly more justified because I have results. I can get jobs much easier. More people like my work, right? People take my classes, they sell out, right? Like I have enough objective truths to kind of just confidently and now more accurately be arrogant, right? Where in the beginning, my arrogance was just like my personality type, you know? But let me just say that taught me, like, because I remember when I used to think this way, how, like, I just realized how stupid it was, like how I shouldn't have been so absolute. And this is kind of where this principled idea started coming from, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so the more you can kind of eliminate that kind of attitude, both on the self-deprecating part as well as the part of like, well, I know a thing. Just realize that could be unnecessary and or indirect blindside that you've put on yourself for no real reason, other than to protect your ego. You know?
Yeah.
And nobody's immune to it. Like, I'm not trying to say that, like, shame on you, how dare you.
Definitely not.
I'm saying
I've done
that
so many
this is
times.
statistically true that most people are like this. We have evidence of this, like in the very things I was just talking about, social media, right? Like selfies is popular for a reason, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like people take selfies at an unbelievable amount of like the front camera is so much more powerful. It's almost as powerful as the back camera now,
Yeah.
which is crazy. But it's like that's evidence that we are really full of ourselves.
I think it reminds me of a quote from the writer George Leonard that not a lot of people are willing to play the role of the fool, and that's actually a benefit if you play the role of the fool because you're able to discourage, what you're saying, like your stubbornness and actually grow from it.
Yeah, if I was only arrogant, then I wouldn't be here, right? The confidence saves me. The confidence saves me from something like, oh, I suck at this thing, and I suck as a person. That's what it saved me from. I didn't think that way ever. When I was not good at something, the opposite happened. I was like, I need to feed my ego. I need to be true to what I believe I am, right? And the only way to do that is to actually execute. And it's to your point too, like be the fool, right? So I started learning how to do that, becoming the fool. I realized, objectively speaking, if you have an empty glass, that means you can fill it up, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Real knowledge. But if you have a full glass full of just air and water, that's like there's nothing there, but it's full of it's just your ego. It's just forward. It's just this front, like loaded, shallow perspective of who you are. When people pour it, take a sip of it, they're not getting anything. It's 0 calories, right? Versus like a smoothie made out of like nutritious bananas and like kale, apples. You know, they're getting some vitamins when they interact with you. Like you're a value to their life, not a negative. And what ends up happening is that you also realize you need a bigger container because you filled up this one. Where if you already think you're good, no, I'm good. I'm the best already. You know, then you're going to be surpassed by individuals who keep increasing the container size because out of necessity. All right.
To be honest, this is reminding me a lot of like the Proco podcast. If
Who?
anybody else watches those,
Proco.
Oh yeah.
Proco.
Yeah.
Robotpencil.
Oh, the Draftsman one?
Yeah. Because
With
Stan kind of
Stan.
talks about a little bit about how when he first started drawing, he also had like a really big amount of confidence when he started, and sometimes it was to the point where like he'd be like, nah, I'm good, but then it was like his instructor would be like, do you need a little help here? You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that reminds me, I have to reach out to his assistant. I think they want me to do a talk with them. That'd be great. I just forgot. You just reminded me. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to I just remembered something. More recently, I started playing Call of Duty, the Warzone online. And the funny thing is, the irony of the whole thing is that, the idea of like putting yourself into a place to, kind of have objective feedback. I found that anytime I play that game and I go on the outskirts and try to like get prepped up so I'm like ready when, you know, I come across another player, I essentially just get shit on. But if I end up landing in a very, very, very hot zone, it's almost like my mind operates entirely differently. I do better. I move a little bit faster. My performance is usually better. I've been noticing that in general. So it's almost like the more defensively I play, the worse I get. I started kind of trying to apply that generally as well in art. And the thing you were saying about people taking things personally, I grew up with that regarding art. More recently, I just started looking at art as nothing more than just another acquirable skill. And that kind of like cut out all the emotional baggage that was there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, art is very personal. I get it. People take it very personal. It's something you put a lot of time in, put a lot of investment in. It's really hard to find out that you're trash. You know, it's hard, man. It's not easy to be like, to kind of find out that you are just doing it wrong. But it's, once you realize it, it's like, it can save you. You know, it's a good thing. But anyway, I'm going to roll out now, guys. Great class, great submissions. You guys are all rock stars. Keep up the good works. Thanks again for all the hard work, the passion. I appreciate it. With that said, I'm gonna roll out. Have a good weekend, and I'll talk to you guys next week. Cheers.
Cool. Sounds good. Have a good night.
Good night,
everybody.
See you guys.
Good night.
Thank you for watching this video. I appreciate it. Please subscribe to watch more in the future. If you like the video, I would appreciate a thumbs up. If you like this content, you can go to my website, robotpencil.net, where you can find mentorships, tutorials, and a Patreon to get more exclusive content. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys in my next videos.